Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Two Blokes and a Tall Lady podcast. I'm Taz, and I'm here with me mate Dead Duck, and we're around the campfire trying to get it all sorted out. Duck and I discuss men's issues, our challenges, our hopes for the future of men and boys, and occasionally our own blind spots. Pull up a stump and join us.
Actually, way more than just two blokes right now. We've got some special guests with us. As always, got Dead Duck, and as always, we've got the tall lady. We've also been joined by Leave It to Stever and our good friend Madhouse and our good friend Moint. So welcome everybody. Today's topic is going to be a pretty painful video that the group of us just watched. Basically, what happened was a young man alone on a television panel being addressed and confronted by a pretty large collection of adult women, and the topic of the attack was his behavior and his addiction to alcohol and him being a disappointment to himself and his family, and most especially his mother. I think we can put the original video in the comment section or the description, so anyone listening to this can also take a look at it either before or after. But I think today what I want to do is just turn it over to Dead Duck to begin with, because he's the one that introduced us to the video, and let him have his say, and then we'll open the floor from there. So Dead, you got it.
Right, yeah. So this young lad was what they call parentified. He was in his late adolescence, very early teens, when he was put into a situation where he was raising his siblings. He's now, I think, the time of the program was recorded, he'd entered his early 20s, and the psychological damage that had been done to him by A, not having a childhood, and B, having no form of support system is absolutely immense. And as Taz has mentioned, we'll put the video in the description for everybody to watch. Unfortunately, one of the problems it has caused has been reliance upon alcohol, which that's never a good thing, never ever a good thing. And this young man was being attacked from all sides by the women on the panel in the studio, including his own mother. And this is something, as men's rights activists, we talk about an awful lot, is men not having the space to come out and speak. And when they do speak out, they get attacked. This is obviously beyond the pale. The young man was in tears, and watching the video is both deeply emotional and anger inducing, to put it very mildly. My blood pressure was up, my adrenaline was up, and I know I'm not alone in thinking like that. There are, for men like this, there can be no hope, and that shouldn't be the case. These women should not be allowed to act in this way. They were allowed to act in that way, and I think we as a group here today need to show men that, this isn't the way, shouldn't be the way. There is help out there, and we need to discuss this, because it was vile. It was just absolutely vile, to be quite honest with you. Leave it to Steve. I'm going to hand it over to you, because in a previous discussion you didn't really get to say anything about it. But you said obviously you've got quite a lot of things you'd like to say on the subject. So if you want to take it from here.
I just was kind of appalled at the way the mother and the other woman on that panel were ganging up on the mother's son, and had the boy or young man seemed devastated, and he really needed someone to help build him up emotionally and psychologically. Instead, the woman on that panel seemed to all victim blame him. it would have been nice if there might have been one or two men there as well. Just but it was certainly not an even playing field in that video, and I think the young man was devastated, and I was hoping he could get out of that situation, but it seems like the mother is kind of I don't know if the term is codependent relationship with the son. That's the best way of putting it. Not being a psychologist myself, yeah. And then I think then I think one of the women in that on that panel accused the young man of trying to manipulate them. And well, I mean, gee, I mean, he was the one being manipulated to begin with, and it's also very sad that he had become alcoholic and trying to cope with this situation.
Yeah. And it's like I tell people, this is appalling. This kind of spectacle and display is offensive and affronting, and frankly, a little scary, because for every one I guess, public display like this, that there are 10,000 happening every day, right? And, in a smaller and more, in my opinion, more intimate and, yeah, Stever, I think you're right, more gaslighting way. This isn't a one and done event for that young man. It's day-to-day life, right? And, the expectation, from really the rest of the world that really knows nothing about, what his day-to-day life is like. The expectation is that he grows up, grows out of it, mans up, pulls a rabbit out of a hat, and suddenly he's okay. Now, in fairness to the rest of the world, I'm going to say I don't blame them for feeling that way. I really don't, and I don't blame them for feeling that way about me, because the alternative that actually works is expensive, time consuming, difficult, humbling, and honestly, just like uncomfortable in a really like long-term way for people to face. People don't like to be humble, right? People don't like to be forgiving. People don't like to manage their expectations of somebody like this. This is where things like man up, and pull yourself up by your bootstraps comes from, because the alternative, as Dead Duck had mentioned earlier, is, to take somebody like this young man on in the long term to the exclusion of anyone in his life currently that might be behaving that way toward him, and support him and watch him struggle and watch him stumble and watch him literally make a fool of himself, like again and again and again, until he knows himself, that there is a way out of all of the different things that have to happen for somebody like this young man to really get better. The one that is most difficult, is for him is, as we say in recovery, the trip between, his head and his heart. And, as I said, it's expensive, it takes time. It's going to be painful for him, and it's going to be painful for anybody watching and trying to help him. But like I said, there is a way to make this work, and there is a way to make it fail. The way to make it fail is to leave him where he is now with the people that he's with. That's pretty much a guarantee that he is not going to be the kind of person, that we all hope he becomes. And, it would be a miracle if he became that anyway, right? But for every miracle, I mean, like I say, there's 10,000 disasters. So, like I said, that's my take on it. Yeah, it was, it was disgusting to watch, right? And it felt like a real insult, and it felt like a real affront to his humanity. And the reason it felt that way is because that's what it was. The real issue is that it is common, and that this Vivica Fox show, it's kind of targeted to probably a certain demographic of African American women. But don't fool yourself for a second. What you saw going on there happens all over the world all the time, and in every different community. So now that I've had my say, tall lady, do you want to chime in?
Oh boy, where to start this other than the fact that this video was unbelievably triggering. Which some people might say, well, it's just a video because, it was on podcasts and stuff and it was set up, but the reality of it is something that happens to many people in real life, regardless how dramatized it is within the video. On top of that, the fact it's in the media in general. I mean, imagine being that kid, a child in a situation, and you go to the media for help because that's what a lot of lonely kids do. And that's what you see on the media. There is no media help whatsoever. It's toxic. And yet that's the support they go to nowadays because they don't have anybody else. They don't have their family. They don't have friends. And, this poor boy is sitting here getting absolutely ridiculed by these women for not being supportive enough for his poor single mother after he has parented himself, his own sibling, for the longest time. And here's the thing that stuck out to me the most about this is I could not believe it that they discredited him because of alcoholism. That was one of the issues I had with that video. Is the minute that they said he was an alcoholic, they discredited everything he said. They discredited his experience. Invalidation, that's what it was. Great choice word, actually, invalidation. The number one word that is generally used by many toxic women and by many feminist organizations and toxic feminist women that we quote unquote invalidate their experience. Well, you just invalidated the experience of this man just because he's having issues with alcohol instead of looking at to what caused that issue and trying to solve it, instead of considering that that is part of the issue, that is the result of the issue. No, they went straight to invalidating his experience. And then not only invalidating it, then turning and saying that he's manipulating his mother, that he is an evil person because he's an alcoholic, and that he's just manipulative and no one should feel anything for him because the alcohol and his mind as a man is causing him to be a terrible person. And this is what the men around the world in that kind of situation face. And men in general, whether it's boys who are being forced in a parentification situation or boys dealing with other situations or men who are very depressed, any person for whatever the reason they end up an alcoholic. This is what they live with. They live with the fact that they will never be able to get help because the minute they mention alcoholism, anything and everything they've experienced is no longer valid to society. The minute they say they drink alcohol to cope or take drugs to cope or whatever addiction it is, instead of saying, wow, that's bad, maybe you should get help, it immediately goes, oh, you're a terrible manipulative person. And that is probably on top of the fact that it's just these women tearing this boy apart and saying, talk your feelings, and then basically shaming him for talking about his feelings. That disgusted me, but that gobsmacked me that the minute the alcohol was brought in, immediately his experience was no longer valid. He was a terrible manipulative person and he's not allowed to be felt for. He's not allowed to get help because he's a problem for being an alcoholic. It was just, it was horrific. It was really horrific. There are so many men who have issues that are being ignored because they go into addictions, but they go into addictions because of these issues. For all the people in the world that say they want to solve addiction, there are many of them that share this attitude of the minute the person says it, they aren't going to help. Well, if you want to solve addiction, you have to solve whatever cause. You need to find, and maybe not solve the issue, but find a way to get over the issue one way or another that caused the addiction, whether it was abuse, whether it was parentification, whether it was depression, whatever it is. And a lot of times, another thing too, this talk show is supposed to be solving issues, let's claim quote unquote therapeutic, even though it obviously isn't. Well, that's how some therapy feels to people. Some therapy is the man just sitting there talking, or the boy, and then being told what they're doing wrong. Well, that doesn't solve the issue. There's all these organizations that claim we're making better men. No, you're telling men how to be better for women. And you're telling them they're not good enough for women. And you're sitting there and telling them that they are the evil to women. And so because of that, they have to change. You aren't listening to their actual issues. You aren't changing them. You aren't teaching them how to be men. You're teaching them how to serve. You're basically teaching them to be servant to women. And they aren't teaching women how men express. They aren't teaching women how to work with men, how to help men through things. They really aren't. Most women are not raised with how to do that. But what they are raised with most times is a lot of praise that, oh, the guy's supposed to do whatever you ask, so don't worry about it. And so they never think to question it. They never think to change, and so, and since they were raised this way, since it's so strong in their mind, they begin to create the programs where they just go, oh, well, you can't have an issue because I've been taught you can't really have an issue. So your issue is just you're not doing enough for women. That was this entire video, was this boy being told you're not doing enough for your mother. And your issues aren't valid, and you're an alcoholic, so now you're a manipulative, and excuse my French, bastard as well. I mean, to what degree are people planning? I have a great question for people in the world of mental health. What form of mental health care are you giving to men if you do not understand them? What form of mental health care are you giving to men if you are sitting here asking why men aren't showing up, but thinking your services work? What form of mental health care are you giving if you're just doing the same stuff of blaming them and telling them they're the issue? What form of mental health care are you giving them when you're telling them because of their addiction, they're a terrible person? Addiction is wrong, but it does not make you a terrible person. There is a very large difference. A terrible person is a person who is purposely malicious, purposely mean and rude and hurtful to others with purpose. Addiction, yeah, you could choose not to leave it, but the reality is a person may keep drinking for many, many years and they want to leave, but they are struggling and they feel they can't because their issue still isn't solved. They're still not able to get help. Are they choosing to still drink? Oh, yes, they are. But they're choosing to drink because they don't know how else to solve the issue, because there's no helping hand or guide to show them. And no, you cannot just miraculously show yourself how to solve the issue. Humans were not built to miraculously solve something by themselves. They were made social creatures. They were made to help one another. And that is how help is supposed to work. That's how mental health should work. The criminalization of people with addiction is something that's been going on for the longest time. And it's just really absurd. I mean, the Prohibition's a fantastic example. The Prohibition in the US, they absolutely banned alcohol across the entire United States because, oh, it's causing addiction, and it's evil, and it's terrible, as if alcohol was the cause. And that all the guys that were getting drunk, were just too easily swayed by this evil thing, and that they were evil. Some of them, it was terrible. They would drink and they would go home and they'd beat people, and that is wrong. And that's terrible and evil. But there were some of them that just drank, and they considered that evil too. They considered all drinking evil. They didn't think about the fact that banning all the alcohol in the world doesn't solve the issue. They didn't think about the fact that the issue might be the fact that the men did not have services back then for mental health. They didn't have anyone to really talk to because of the social norms that were in place. All they thought is, we ban alcohol, the evil's gone. And to say that we have improved somehow in the last 100 years is an absolute joke. We have not improved our help for male mental health in 100 years. We have started opening up about it. We have started talking about it a little bit, yes. But have we actually improved it? Absolutely not. The day that male mental health is improved is the day that we stop criminalizing people and telling them they're awful for their addictions and start going, okay, You have an addiction. Why do you have it? Tell me your life story. What activities do you need to do to get through this? That is the day that male mental health will finally make any sort of change. This poor child is going to have the hardest life growing up. He has no support. He's already an alcoholic, and he's not exactly emotionally mature. And I say not exactly because, see, that was one of the few things I contradicted within the video. He is and is not emotionally mature. He's not emotionally mature in the fact that he wasn't taught how to handle things, and so it ends up being taken out and bottled up and then exploding. That's not emotionally mature. But he is slightly emotionally mature in the fact that he knows how to emotionally hold himself back when in a situation where he has to present himself in front of somebody. You know, he said he literally raised his sibling. So in front of teachers, he knows how to act. He's very mature in front of teachers, probably. He's very mature in front of officials. He's emotionally immature in the fact that he emotionally doesn't know how to open up. When it comes to opening up, feelings, that kind of stuff, he is immature. When it comes to the face value emotions, he is quite mature, which honestly is quite funny because you can tell his mother. Well, I was going to say she was the complete opposite, but now that I think back to the video, I don't think she's either. She's immature both ways, at face value and emotionally. So, yeah, he had the maturity to realize he had a problem. He just doesn't have the maturity to know how to deal with. Thank you, Doc, for that one. And that is a good first step. He at least has the maturity to recognize his issue. The problem is that he needs someone. He currently has no one. He needs the intervention of a lifetime, because this is just going to keep continuing. And sadly, this is going to really affect his life because of the fact that we villainize people who had addiction so badly that it's very hard for them to even get work afterwards, because we think, oh, they had an addiction, they can't control themselves, so they shouldn't be working. They could always go back to it. You know, we in the US, and honestly, I feel like in many other countries, we have this system that we call justice. We have this system that we call background checks and being sure of things, but they are not just and they are not fair. All they are is judgmental. All they are is far too critical. And none of them are forgiving, and they should be. Just because you were an alcoholic 20 years ago does not mean you are incapable now. And those systems do not recognize that. They are built against redemption. And that is another thing that needs to change. And getting back to the point of, if you want to say mental health has gone better in the last 100 years, there's another point. When redemption gets added to the system, call me up and let me know. Because frankly, it won't change until redemption's added in the system. Because this boy this was on TV too. Well, this was a podcast, I believe, but the video we were shown looked like a TV showing. So this is on TV, so he has to now live everywhere he goes for the rest of life. Oh yeah, you're the alcoholic boy who was on TV. Yeah, we don't hire alcoholics. I don't know how old that video is, but let's say it was maybe 10 years ago, and now he's miraculously sobered up. Everywhere he's going, he's running out of a job, because no one wants to hire him because he was the boy on TV with an alcoholic problem. And they will make records of your recovery. And although it's slightly understandable why workplaces might want to know that, it's also detrimental because it makes it impossible for you to get your life back. There is just no system for actual recovery. And all I can really say is I hope this boy finds someone who can help him out, who can talk to him and hopefully get him on his feet, because this is not just the depression, this is not just the drinking, it is his entire life, sadly. And his mother chose it to make it even worse by putting him on TV, letting him get shamed, putting him further in the hole. And then on top of that, when he finally gets out of that hole someday, if he does, little prayer to God that he does, that he will find it impossible to be back in the world. And that's from his own mother. You, lady, have failed at your job as a parent. And I will wrap up my point there and talk about it later. Motivational interviewing, would you like to go and talk about how you felt about the video?
You know what, really quick before motivational goes, I just wanted to point out to all the listeners that Tall Lady hasn't brought any of this to you, all those things she just said, from any course of study or any individual mentors. She figured all this stuff out because she pays attention and she takes on what she hears from men and boys. She is an example that these things can be done even in the face of the tide of sewage that women get, get covered in every day by media and everything in their own community. This tall lady has had to put up with that too, and yet here she is. So just wanted to put that out there. And motivational, go ahead and go.
Yes. I want to add on to what Tall Lady said, because the thing about the system, specifically like prison and mental health industry, it seems like it doesn't really exist to do what it claims it's intended to do. It was like the whole purpose of the justice system was to redeem people, and the whole purpose of the mental health industry was to help them get better. But as time goes on, it just looks as if like the purpose, like what they do is intentionally try to lock people up as long as they can, and the mental health industry sees how more dependent they can get people on medicine, and how more dependent they can get people on counseling. Less about the actual help and more about what can I get, what type of services and dependency can I get from the people coming to me. And so it's like my first instinct when I saw him dealing with what he was dealing with on the show, I was thinking at first, my first instinct was like, oh, maybe you should probably talk to a therapist instead. But I thought about it, it's like, I don't know if that would be much better either. So it's because it's hard to tell. You never know what type of therapist you're going to get. If the therapist is generally trying to help you, or whether they're just, or whether they're just going to try to how do I say it? Try to manipulate his pain for their own personal gain. I just really genuinely run out of like answers like when I see stuff like that, because like what genuinely do you do? First off, he was a child forced to be the adult around the house, like forced to take care of other children. Like, you don't even know who you are yet as a person. You haven't even experienced life. The reason adults take care of children is because they've experienced life already, from childhood to from a baby to being an adult. So they're experienced enough to take care of other people, to help guide them through life. He hadn't even experienced that by the time he was helping raise children. And to get hooked on alcohol on top of that, it made my head hurt. I thought the parenting was enough, but then the alcohol thing, and now it almost feels hopeless and almost useless, because it's like, well, what exactly do you tell that person? How exactly do you help that person? It's difficult, to say the least. Mm-hmm. I wish I had an actual substantive answer to give to him, like what exactly I can do to help. But it's like every answer I feel like giving, I feel like it would just come back to haunt him. Like it wouldn't help. It would do more harm than good, if that makes sense. Who hasn't gone? Has Madhouse gone? Would you like to go, Madhouse?
Yes. Yes, I would. Tall Lady brought up some excellent points. Like, this boy, I don't know if like this is stating facts or not, but because he was, because he was forced to be the adult in certain things, adults, what do you get to do whenever you become an adult? And certain, you get to drink. It for us in the United States. So maybe he's thinking, my mom does this to cope with the stress, so maybe I need to do this in order to cope with my own stress, because I'm the one having to parent everybody, and I'm having to deal with the responsibilities of adulthood as a child. And so he's like, you know what, since I'm having to do the adult thing, I get to do, such as raising a parent and being a parent, I'm just gonna do this because I'm having to be the adult anyway. And that's not okay. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I was a kid when I had alcohol for the first time. I'm just gonna go ahead and tell on myself. But that was just because I was a stupid kid. There's a much bigger problem with this particular little boy, and now that he's an adult. And I think the majority of men, carry a good chunk of, the addiction rate. Well, the reason why, I think, is because we don't give them any proper coping mechanisms. We don't. And we give them lack of mental health resources. And so what do? They react in some pretty messed up ways, because we're all addicted to something that helps take the pain away, whether that can be, and it could be anything. So for some people it's caffeine, some people it's coffee, some people it's caffeine, for a lot of it could be a multitude of different things. But the fact of the matter is, he was forced to be an adult at 13. That's bananas. And the developmental stages that he was forced to skip just to survive is probably going to do a lot of damage. But going back to how the whole panel of women were on there, that panel was so disrespectful, mean, malicious towards that young man when he was pouring out his feelings, whenever he was explaining, just constantly just bullying him. They were essentially, it felt like nothing but a panel of bullies of what I was seeing. And that's kind of how modern day feminism has turned out to be. It's just a big form of bullying, whether it's towards men or other women. That's how it is nowadays, and that's not okay. And that single mother, I mean, shouldn't have put that boy in that sort of a position. She needed to do what she had to do as a parent and parent those kids properly, instead of passing the buck over to that boy that had no idea what he was doing. None. And it's mind-boggling to me that he had to do that. He shouldn't have had to. They were not that panel. That's the situation itself was awful. That panel is what really was just the icing on the cake, and it pissed me off, the way that they did that. I want to take that boy and say, this is you are going with my father and to get some help, because that was bad.
Yeah, this needs to be the next thing we really talk about, doesn't it? What's needed to help somebody in that situation? Because there was nobody in the audience, for example, that was going to walk down there, conk him over the head, put him over their shoulder, and walk back out the studio with him again and take him somewhere safe. And, I said in our previous discussion, we'll say it was a young African-American lad who we're talking about. We've got people within the group that are young African-American men, and that is one of the type of people that young lad needed desperately, because of the ability to relate to them on the basis of age, to a certain degree experience of life. But also, we've got people within this group that have battled with addiction. They're also the type of people that can help. And one of the things I talk about quite often on my personal social media accounts is the erasure of men's spaces, and how that is also affecting men's mental health. And time again, you will see people saying, well, men just need to go to therapy. No, they can't, because the therapy just isn't good enough in general. Yes, it works for the outlier, but the outlier isn't the rule. Something else needs to be done. Peer support is probably, for men, the most important form of therapy you can have. And we've spoken about it before on this channel, about things like men's sheds and walking to recovery and things like that. And that's what that young man needs. He doesn't need to go and sit in a room with someone who's going to potentially make him feel 10 times worse than he already does. He needs people that are going to listen, and the types of people that are going to listen to that young man are those that have battled with addiction, and those that can relate to him personally on an age and, in this case, certainly race-related manner. So that's for this young man, that would be my course of action: take him out of the environment and then put him in contact with people that can relate to him in various different ways, and hope and pray that he. I'm not a religious man by any stretch of the imagination. I'm an angry atheist, but hope and pray that he begins the long, hard road to recovery, because it could potentially take decades out of his life if he even gets any kind of support now. Taz, and then I think Mo, you probably be the best two people to speak next on this.
Listening to all of this, especially Madhouse and Tall Lady, like messages of hope and determination, and support, and messages that are honest, right? They're coming from us, but the fact is that, we're just 6 people. We've been through quite a bit, some more than others. But something, that despite the fact that an alien from another planet looking at our message and then looking at this other message, I think it's pretty clear which one they would say is correct, and I kind of saved this for now. Specifically, one of the people on that panel was identified as a judge, and this was in contrast to all of the others, someone not African American, right? And someone specifically that is Caucasian, specifically female, right? And even so, even in that discussion about that young man, right, this creature, everyone decides, is the final authority, right? And as bad as everybody else was, okay, her comments were the most ruthless, they were the most vicious, they were the most cunning, and they were the most antagonistic. Out of everybody there, she was the worst of the worst, right? And yet, the society at large looks at her title by comparison with everybody else. Vivica Fox is a celebrity, but and the mother is a mom, but this person is a judge, right? And I can't think of any less hopeful, less honest, and less human message than the one that she delivered. That was what, of all of them, that was hers were the words that most made me want to, have this discussion in this podcast. That's, what she had to say on that panel in that context was inhuman. Okay? And I want to make it clear for everyone that among authorities of her type, it is common. Okay? She is not, I repeat, she is not the exception. Okay? When I tell people that, really addressing in any permanent way the mental and emotional well-being of men, certainly in the West, really everywhere, is going to require resources. I'm talking about Pentagon budget resources over time, and not just transfer of wealth, but opportunity cost and productivity cost. It's going to hurt. And it's because of people like that. They have been running the shop since before I was born. And because of that, we now have what we have. And the, I guess, less difficult and less, lack of a better word, catastrophic options that had been out there, they are gone now. Okay? And they are not coming back. Okay? The best we can hope for is a very long, very slow, very expensive, very humbling, and very difficult road ahead. Or we just go ahead and succumb to it and let the whole thing fall apart. There is no door number 3. I wish there was. And I take some tiny little small measure of accountability and responsibility for the fact that those other easier options are gone. But, the only thing I guess that, I want to make sure to put out there is those options are gone. There are no easy ways now. There is only this and nothing else. So, Steve, you got anything else to say?
Wow, I mean, yeah, you and Tall Lady and Duck and Madhouse and Moment have covered it so well. I don't really think it could add anything right now. I mean, I did have some observations, such as I think the word gaslighting kind of came to mind after I spoke. I think you mentioned that. I think maybe it's a classic example of gaslighting. What's going on with that young man? It's just frustrating because one wishes that one could help such a young man, but really just a helpless observer in all this, and also to know that this is probably being repeated in countless other places as well.
For me, it was they were completely like disregarding the young boy's experience, and they were bullying him, making him feel like he was, he was the bad guy when really he wasn't. It was the mom. It was the mom. Now, the way that were there some ways that he was coping with it in a very unhealthy way? Yes, but guess what? Newsflash, he's a human being. He can, like, we all cope with things in an unhealthy way sometimes. Except in this case, he was 13 from the moment that he was 13, he was completely, like, basically left on his own. And so of course it makes sense that he would, cope with things in the not so, it makes sense that way, that sometimes those things happen. But the fact of the matter is that panel is that I'm stuttering because I'm trying to, like, not say anything that is just that would get us banned, or that would trying to keep it as clean as possible. So yeah, let's just say it was very, very, very shameful what those women did to that young man, and that ruffled my feathers for sure.
I will say, to the point that Tasira made about gaslighting, it really was gaslighting. I mean, gaslighting is just manipulating someone to question themselves. That's really what they succeeded at. They succeeded at manipulating this boy. Well, maybe they didn't succeed. And I only say that in the fact that it looked like he was still possibly strong in knowing that what he feels is real in the video. But nonetheless, they were gaslighting, and they succeeded to a certain extent, I would say a good amount, in trying to make him believe that he really is the terrible person and that nobody should feel for him and that he's the real issue. And that is just absolutely horrendous. And it was every single person on that panel that was gaslighting him. Even the host, who seemed like she was helping for the first 2 seconds, turned on him almost instantly. His own mother was gaslighting him. She started the whole thing gaslighting. They asked about his childhood, and her answer was, I was a single mother. They were asking about him, darling, not you. His childhood, how he was raised. And I bet you 101 she has no idea how to answer that, because she doesn't know, because she didn't raise her son. He had to raise himself. He had to teach himself the things he knows. She didn't raise him whatsoever. Ask her what kind of person he is, and she will not be able to give you an answer. She will probably just scream at you, claim that he's terrible or that you're asking her a stupid question, because the mother doesn't know. He has been on his own, and he has been his only figure in life. He has had no figure whatsoever. When Dead Duck was talking about Taz and a couple others would be the greatest role models in his life, he was right. Every child needs someone they not needs, well, do need, but instinctually choose someone that becomes their role model, someone they look up to, someone they start, in a way, learning their habits from. I mean, it's like when you talk about studies of chimpanzees, and they notice that they always have the person they learn their habits from, that they sort of copy. It's the same for human. We're copying off of somebody. We're learning from them, and that is what we become in many ways in the future. You can change, obviously, and you will take different experiences and different things that will mold you to be different from them, because everyone is unique. But that base foundation, that is the most important foundation, because that is what you build from up. That is the clay. That the rest of life is just the hands and the water and the spinning table to mold it. And he had no clay. He had the tools to be molded, but he had no clay to mold. And if he had someone like Taz or like some other people, he would have clay, because he'd have a basic person he can finally look at and relate to, and to help him with this. Someone to help him create the handle on his cup, on how things are to be. And he didn't have that. And that's genuinely what he needs now, because he is getting into adulthood, and he needs more than ever to find that clay, that person who is a really good role model to help him through this and teach him how he's supposed to get through this. So, I mean, the best is for him to find role models, and if possible, for him to get out of there, which I know is hard, because although he is hurting so much, I bet because of the fact he was a parent to his siblings and not his mother, there are also many ways that he's actually helped his siblings. Because although he's had nothing, acting mature in front of his siblings has probably given them the clay they need to grow up to be fantastic. And so it's hard, because he knows if he leaves them, that their progress could be shattered. But he needs to do what's best for himself right now, and they will hopefully follow soon ahead, because once he helps himself, you can help others. See, this is why they say in airplanes, help yourself first and then others. It goes to life too. So remember, same advice on airplanes goes to life. Help yourself, and then you can help others. If you don't help yourself, you can't help nobody.
I think that this whole situation, it really hammers home two things that I noticed. One, even when men are just teenagers, when they're just young adults, they're still treated as if they should have the responsibilities and be in actions and thought process of adults. Because even though he was a teenager, they thought, well, this guy is clearly fit to be taking care of other children. He's clearly fit to be babysitting to help his mom out, versus getting an actual adult babysitter or professional babysitter. You're just seen as like, so as early as your young adult stage, you're already seen as like this outright adult. Like, you're already seen as this guy who should already have responsibilities down packed. It should already know better for everything. It's not just seen as, well, it's not just seen as, all teens are messing up. It's seen as, well, you should know better. And secondly, I think the issue, what I'm noticing is that society has this weird habit of telling men that they should open up more, they should speak out more, they should talk more, they should be more open to other people. Yet in even the slightest sense of men opening up, they're always shouted down. They're always told that they need to be better. They're always told that it's whatever's happening to them is their own fault. They're always told that anything that bad that happens to them is a reflection of their own failures in life. So it's like, so then it puts you in this predicament of like, is this guy? So it puts you in this predicament where you either have the ability to just sit there and continue to not open up, or you risk opening up and risk frustrating yourself by how little support or little actual substantive help you're actually getting. And that's kind of the scary part, because the guy who was being berated, he pretty much was doing what society always tells him to do. He's pretty much opening up. He was trying to tell people this is a problem. He wasn't escaping responsibility. He didn't say he didn't do anything wrong. He said, yeah, like drinking is wrong. He took immediate responsibility. He said having an alcohol problem is something I would like to fix. But he was being treated as if like, oh, you need to be better. You need to do this. You need to do that. Versus like, well, maybe he came from he had a broken home. There was personal issues that may have affected his growth process. And they should have taken it from a long psychological standpoint. Instead, it was more of a lecturing. It was more like a lecturing seminar of people wagging their fingers at him. Yeah, that was just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and you brought up like an excellent point. I think it's because of like a culture. I think in a lot of ways, young boys are treated like adults the majority of the time is because of the fact that we still have this very like traditional, sense and way of thinking that one day, they're going to get married, they're going to have, kids, they're going to have to raise a family at some point, and they're going to need to be in charge of something. We have this male headship thing that we place on young boys at an age where they don't have enough brain development to be able to uphold that and fully yet. So from the age that he was with this, with the mom not, not having any involvement of raising him in those crucial, developmental years, he was still, still being treated as if he was this adult that had to be in charge of everything, because we still think that, no matter what, even if they're little boys, that they have to uphold this like head of household, responsibility. It's almost like, when, basically it's this situation right here where either a relationship breaks down, something happens, and the mom is left to be a single mother. Well, the single mother ends up projecting a lot of that stuff, a lot of things onto the oldest male child, and says, okay, well, you're the head of the household now, so now you have to be in charge of everything. No, it's not that child's job, that adult eldest male child's responsibility to raise you. And there's many different situations and scenarios where it happens on the flip side for women as well. But at the same time, we place that responsibility at an age that's not the time or place yet, and that he was still a child at the time. He shouldn't have had to bear that responsibility at that age. He should have been able to be and do all of these things that a normal child would have, so that way he could do that later on in his life and be able to do those and be able to uphold those responsibilities in a healthy way. But he didn't, and that's a big issue. So that's a big problem. That's why we're having these issues that we are today, is because we're placing these responsibilities on young boys that they shouldn't have to, because they're young boys. They don't understand that yet. And conservative groups, they do that all the time. Traditional conservative groups, they do that all the time. And a bunch of, just society in general does that all the time. And it's a problem, and it needs to stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And as someone who has seen it from both sides of the fence, I spoke earlier on, I was in the similar situation to this young lad, in that I was raising my two siblings from the age of 10 to about 15 or 16. So all through my senior school years, I was in a similar situation. Obviously, when my marriage broke down and I moved to the other side of the country, because that was all I had, my son, from a very young age, as he was, found himself, as the man of the house, in inverted commas. Now, the difference is obviously I'm around a lot outside of work. He spends an awful lot of time with me, so he's not really had to carry the burden of being old before his time. And it's not a nice place to be in. It really isn't. It really isn't. So this particular video, as we said, we'll put it in the description, really hit home hard. And seeing that young lad's tears really hit home as well. It's not nice. It really isn't nice. It made me extremely angry on his behalf. And this is another reason that one of my big things is, when you take fathers out of the home, or at least out of the lives of their children, you those children up, you destroy the children. And that is all we have done for 50, 60 plus years now, is just destroy each and every single new generation that comes along. It's only getting worse. And as Taz has said on several occasions, we've run out of time. We've got to do something, and we've got to do something now. Can you blame feminism for a lot of this? Yes, you can, undoubtedly. But there's also the toxic expectations on these young boys that they will mature and become young men instantaneously. They will bear the responsibility that they have no tooling for, as Madhouse and Tall Lady have pointed out on multiple occasions. And it's the only way, if we don't do something now, the only way this is going to end is in the death of civilization, because we have singled out these young men in particular. It's obviously, it affects girls as well. Teenage pregnancy rates and all that sort of stuff. But we have singled out these young men, we have broken them, and then we have complained that they are broken and that they are toxic and they are everything else. We need to take a damn good hard look at ourselves, let alone these young boys. And the time has come for civilization at large to recognize the problem, to come together and do something about it. Taz, I think you want to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Ted. As I said, of all of the things that I watched in that video and that I remember from my own life and that I hear too often every day, the one that is the easiest for me to point to and say, this is why there are no easy answers left, is, again, what was said by that judge. Said, this is her attitude and her behavior and her words, they have become the final word on young men. And like I said, taken in their own context, that message and those words and her attitude are really not human, and this is why things are so bad now. Ded, you were saying we're out of time, and again, I add to that, more importantly, we're out of easy ways out. I mean, it's going to be very expensive. It's in, again, not just wealth transfer, but also productivity and opportunity cost for everybody to make this right. When I say that, what I mean is a young man like that, in order to really be put back together and made whole again, he's not going to be able to do that and put his neck in the harness at the same time. Okay? He's going to have to be left, out of the productivity loop until such time as he can go back into it, and until such time as he's going to want to. It's not going to be a month, guys. It may take years, and I'm only talking about one young man. Okay, multiply him by millions, right? We've adjusted civilization to take young men like himself, okay, completely, debilitated and ruined, right? But yet we can still make them productive as long as we don't quite see them as human, and we don't. The trouble is that that methodology is quickly running out of gas, right? That does not have much life left to it. It will fail, and it will be soon. Okay, the very difficult and expensive and humbling and sacrificial way to somehow get out of this, again, it won't end in a month, right? It will be over with a long time from now, a long time after Ded and I are not in the picture no more. The only thing we can do is tell people to get started and be ready, to roll up sleeves and, bow head and take accountability, and as much as anything else, throw off, and dispose of the authority and the control that's being exercised by people like that judge. I wish I had a better answer, but from my perspective, I really don't. and that sucks. I feel like I'm, every time we do this, all I have is bad news. I have a hope in people, individual people. I'm looking at people that I have a lot of hope in. Like I said, we're us. The ones in control are not. I wish they were, but so far they don't seem to show up in these discussions. So
See, this is hard because then when it finally gets back around, everybody said a little something that I want to comment on, and it's gonna take forever to get to everybody because you're all saying very good things. But firstly, to the point that X-Men made and Maddie and Dead Duck about boys growing up, I think that's a big part of mental health that also gets really ignored. It's a part that no one really discusses about the fact that we've always pressured as a society for men to grow up so much sooner than women. And it's pressure that isn't healthy at all. And it's a pressure that also reflects in life. I mean, talking about our justice system, boys who are in their teen years are more likely to get adult sentences, even though they're teen, pushed up to adult sentences, than a female who were a teenager. There's so many more consequences on them because they are already given the judgment of an adult by the time they turn like 15. They're labeled from a young age as people who are thinking such vile things already ahead of time naturally that we believe those vile things have supposedly quote unquote matured by the time they're teenagers, and they haven't. There is no vile things. They're just thinking normally. We see them as so much of a threat. Well, if we're seeing boys and men as a threat, how are you supposed to help them? Because that's all you're going to treat them as. We make them, we teach them responsibility of the protector. And this is a conversation we had slightly earlier too, when it came to parenting. We were talking about how fathers treat their daughters, and the father of daughters will believe his daughters and we much harder on males. And then it was brought up that somebody believed that the father of daughters and sons were more fair. And in some ways that could be true. In other ways it also isn't, because many of them just raise their sons to end up being the knight for their daughter instead of their own man, instead of their own person. And so they're taught that they have to be this protector, even if she's older than the son, that he has to be the protector early on. And that pressure has always been put on men and boys. And it isn't spoken about the fact that that isn't a good method. It's not a good teaching. It's a toxic teaching, which sort of builds into all these other issues they tend to have as well, because they end up in this situation where they feel they can't share anything, where they feel they have to protect, and they don't think about protecting themselves or helping themselves. And so they then don't help themselves because they don't really know how to, because they're told to help everyone else. And it's something that's been there forever. And Taz's point about, it's already here. It is here. It's facing us in the eye. It's been facing us face to face, nose to nose, for not just decades, but for centuries. And we've chose to ignore it. We've given it a name. Even when we give it a name, we're still ignoring it. We are not actually looking it in the eye and telling it, no, it will not be this way. We're going to change it. We haven't actually done that. What we've had done, the small little excuses, the short way, we've said, oh, we're just going to ignore you. We're not actually going to solve anything about it. We're just ignoring you. And that'll solve the issue. And ignoring anything does not solve something. And so it's really the situation where we're getting to a point where ignoring it for so many years has now caught up to us. As I said, mental health. You tell me mental health has changed in the last century. I'm gonna take Moen's little comment he made earlier. I will tell you to talk to the hand, because it hasn't changed whatsoever. We haven't talked about redemption. We haven't talked about changing the entire social structure of forcing men to grow up and to be adults at teenage years. We haven't talked about seeing them through teenage years and teenage experiences. Women go through the stages of, baby, adolescent, childhood, teenage, adult. But men, in reality, they don't really go through teenage. It just goes baby, adolescent, child. You're acting a bit like a teenager because you are one, but you have adult. They just go straight in adult because it is adult judgment, adult responsibility, son protector that they're raised to be. And sometimes it's even before then. Obviously, with this guy, his mother has been a single mother his whole life. So he's had to be protector and adult his whole life. He was maybe baby, adolescent, adult, and that's a big issue we run into. In that kind of situation, people who are in that situation, people dealing with what he deals with, and then getting the kind of the commentary he did, the attitude that he did, the horrendousness of things that he got, that is what is facing us in the eye right now. And we cannot run away from it any longer, and we cannot keep ignoring it, because it is stabbing us 25 times in the gut. We are bleeding out. And unless we do something very soon, that is very hard, and actually start a healing process and, confronting it, we're gone. We're done. It's here. It is here. It has stabbed us 25 times, and you have 2 minutes before you drop dead on the ground and are gone forever. And it's not going to be another one of these, oh, we're totally doing something. Oh, we started offering therapy or, counselors at schools and stuff. No, it needs to be a long, real process of changing everything. It needs to be a process where we sit here and we start forcing the systems we have to culminate redemption, where we start changing social norms and completely reteaching people about everything, where we stop pressuring boys so early to start adulthood early, where we take away those adult punishments on them, or we spread them equally between men and women. You got two options: take away from both or put on both. That's your option. And if you think it's too hard for women, then it's probably too hard for the boys too. If it's too hard for the girls, then it's probably also too hard on the boys, mental health wise. You need to start teaching these boys about leadership again. You need to start bringing role models in their lives. A single parent is not ideal. If you end up a single parent, you end up a single parent, but that does not give an excuse for not giving that boy a role model, and a real role model, and a real person closer to their age that they can share experiences and talk with. We need to start bringing that back. We need to make changes to how they're spoken about. We need to start opening up the floor when it comes to talks about gender issues, about how not only women feel, but how men feel, about teaching them how to coincide with one another, how to learn from one another. And that will be long, and frankly, it will be painful, because we are already so far gone, and we have so many cuts, and it will take many more cuts to get there. But in the end, it will be much less cuts than continuing to, it will be something that will heal over time. There'll be less cuts, and you'll have cuts that are healing, while there's maybe one or two added, instead of just having a bunch of cuts open and bleeding out and you're dead in 2 minutes. And that is what needs to happen.
It's kind of a rebuttal to what a tall lady said. I think a lot of the times, society sees boys almost as robots, and they're only allowed to have like 3 default settings. They're only allowed to have, and they're not allowed to have emotions and all of that stuff, because they see that as like some sort of like virus of some sort. And I don't see it as virus. It's because I don't see men as robots. I see men as human beings. But I think that's the way that society has programmed them to be, is to go out and be a robot that provides. Go out and be a robot that shows no emotion. Go out and be a robot that does this, and this, and go out and be. And if you show a shred, and if you do a single thing wrong, you're a robot that's going to be put away for a very, very long time. And you don't, even as a little boy, you're going to get a 64% longer sentence. You're going to get a far much more. And I think that's the problem. We need to stop seeing men as robots, because that's the Trojan. I think a lot of the times that's the Trojan horse, or the Trojan virus. Let's just say that. It's a big Trojan virus that's going to be the death of society.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We need to change how we view it. I just use knight instead of robot, because they're also seen as the protector, and knights were taught to be the stoic protectors of.
Well, you can program a robot nowadays to shoot and to kill and to provide.
Yeah, that's really true. It's easier maybe now than ever before, to view men as not quite human, because we very clever, mostly men, have We've created a lot of, lack of a better term, replacements for ourselves. You know, whether it's manufacturing or defense or, service, supply chain, whatever. A lot of it, we've automated without ever, without ever looking at the, consequences of how we will be seen, right? So, if we if we create a bunch of robots that can do what we do, then it's harder to blame people for looking at us as robots. Somebody in the chat was asking, what is, like, who does have an answer? And I put a list of names in there. Gabor Mate, Jonathan Haidt, Bessel Van Der Kolk, Richard Reeves, and even to some degree Brene Brown. And they're these days very popular authors and speakers. And my problem is that one of the reasons that they are popular speakers is because of the fact that they are presenting, a real answer. But what isn't being said is these are not easy answers. Gabor Mate is, about universal compassion, forgiveness, and trauma recovery. And, people even hear me say that with everything I have behind me. And, they sound like pretty words. And I suppose they are. But what's behind them, is, as I say, a great deal of resource transfer over a very long period of time. Back in World War II, the Allies and their governments would encourage people to grow victory gardens, and they made it all really positive, and they made it sound like, such a fun and interesting thing to do. What they were really saying behind it was, it's a good idea to grow a garden so you don't starve. You see what I'm saying? In other words, these people, they do make it sound interesting, and they make it sound, sometimes even maybe a little utopian. But if our choices are either strive for utopia or go down the drain, then I'm going to choose striving for utopia. Even if it's hard, even if it means, sacrifice, even if it means, knowing when to shut up when I feel like complaining, right? Knowing when to forgive when it's the last thing on earth I want to do. It's like forgiveness comes with its own set of benefits. That's true. But the thing that it does, for everybody else is a lot bigger than what it does for me, right? And like I said, that is the kind of message these people are preaching. What they don't have is the same level of authority and the same kind of audience that our friend the judge has. This, I hate to keep harping, but what this judge says, not on the TV show, but in her courtroom, what she says goes, and if what she says is this young man deserves no compassion and no forgiveness and, nothing but scorn and admonishment and punishment, that's what's going to happen. That's what people will do. They will punish, scorn, reject, and ostracize this young man because the judge said so, after all. And if that is allowed to continue, right, then all of these things that we're talking about, that there needs to be a way, and we have to be ready to roll up our sleeves, etc. It also means getting people like that out of the way now and from now on, to just never allow anyone like that a position of any responsibility ever again. And that is a huge cost, because that means if we don't give it to them, we're going to have to do it ourselves, right? And that's going to be hard, anyway. Anybody else have any final thoughts before we close this up?
I guess I'll start with a closing thought. This has been by far one of the worst examples of societal wide abuse of men that I have seen outside of conscription to warfare or what have you. It's both a singular event and a microcosm of reality facing a lot of men and boys all around the world, not just in sort of first world nation or first world countries such as the United Kingdom and the United States of America. This needs to end. It needed to end yesterday, and I fear that it's too late, but I hope I'm wrong. And that's my final thought on the subject. Tall lady, do you want to leave everyone with your final thoughts?
Final thoughts. This video was unbelievably hard to watch. I'm so thankful we got to talk about it though. Hopefully everyone leaves here with something to think about. Hopefully someone leaves here having learned something. And for those watching, I hope this has opened your eyes more. If anybody's watching the mental health field, don't you dare ever say that there has been change. Because what you're doing is very small. Yes, you have finally started talking about mental health. Yes, you're starting to get stuff rolling. But it is not enough. You need to do more. And when you do more, come back. So you've done everything that's been listed, that's been said here. Nothing's changed. It's not enough. Everyone needs to take a step towards change. Mental health industry, you're not doing enough. Take this as your warning. Change now, or let us all fall. And leave it to Stever. Have anything he wants to say as a finishing note?
Okay, I'll unmute here. Yeah, well, you've all actually gone way beyond what I was able to say. I did mention gaslighting, and it was appalling to see this going on, but I think a lot of you have just gone farther than I did. So I guess I'll just pass it back to all of you. You've done a great job here. I just hope that this can be a springboard to something else. And also what Taz wrote as to the people there that he mentioned, maybe that could be posted in the introduction just so people can look up like Gabor Mate, mate, Jonathan Haidt, Bessel Van Der Kolk, and I guess Richard Reeves. Yeah. I'd have to look at these people myself. I'm not even familiar, but maybe they have something good to say. All right. Would anyone else like for me to pass this on to them?
Madhouse, maybe?
Madhouse, would you like to go? And I will sign off. Thanks a lot.
Yes, this video was it made me shake a little bit because it was that difficult to watch. But I want to say to a good chunk of society, don't you dare say, I mean, I'm piggybacking on what Tall Lady said. Don't you dare say that men don't have issues. Don't you say that men don't have all the rights in the world. Just kindly hush whenever it comes to that. And yeah, and let's stop seeing men as robots and let's start seeing them as human beings, and maybe we can fix the issues that we have. And that's what I have to say.
All right. And yeah, I'll put the the authors I mentioned in the description, along with a link to the video we're talking about, because I really do think it's worth everybody watching the video and then looking these people up. I warn everyone, those authors, I kind of picked them specifically because in the context of the manosphere in general, you're going to be reading some stuff you're not going to like at first. But just like with what the judge said, it doesn't matter what we want or don't want. We need to focus on what either will work or will not. Because some things will work, some few, most things won't. They will fail, right? And everyone will pay for that failure. Like I said, victory gardens, guys. Just think that way. That's where we're at. Ration cards and victory gardens. Okay, out on the front end, they make it all sound good and positive, but on the back end, it's about not starving, right? So go at it that way. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And thanks to all of you who are listening for listening. Please do give us a like and a comment and subscribe if you want to hear some more. And I think that's it. Unless anybody has anything else, then thank you so much, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.